Buried in this budget bill is the biggest land grab in a century.
Conservative MP Gallant exposes the Liberals' intention to steal the land from hardworking Canadians and give them absolutely no democratic way to recover it. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. During the debate for the budget before it was approved, Cheryl Gallant stood up in the House of Commons. She's a member of Parliament for the Conservative Party. And she exposed how the Liberals have hidden inside of this budget a scheme to steal a lot of land from hardworking Canadians. Most of the land is going to be in Eastern Ontario. The idea is that they'll be appropriating the land so that they can put down one of those hideous high-speed rails. Now, we'll be talking about that once we allow MP Cheryl to explain it to us. Everybody who watches this channel regularly knows that I'm a huge fan of magnetic levitation because I understand the science and I understand that it's the way forward, it's the future. High-speed rail is hideous and it interferes way too much with the environment to be considered anything other than hideous and bad for the environment. When there is a faster, cleaner alternative, that's what we need to be considering. I say that out loud for people that don't watch this channel regularly so that you can appreciate I already have a position on high-speed rail. I think we need to focus more on the amount of rules that the Liberals have put in place that they're now trying to change to suit a few people, very wealthy people already in Quebec, because it's a Quebec interest that is trying to do this. And remember, while all you're hearing this, there is already an existing rail line between the city of Quebec and the city of Toronto, and it suffers for passengers most of the time. So it's not as if people are lined up around the corner clamoring for this train that'll go a little bit faster. No one is using the existent method, so why would they use a new method? And why would we put our country through the hideousness of a high-speed rail in effort to make a few people very, very wealthy and make a lot of problems for a lot of hardworking middle-class Canadians?
Try to ignore reality, but eventually it'll hit you like a freight train. Unfortunately, for anyone who owns property between Quebec City and Toronto, this government plans to hit you with a high-speed train. Justin Trudeau launched the largest expropriation of private property in Canadian history with his gun grab. Now, even that legacy isn't safe. Buried in this budget bill is the biggest land grab in a century. Canadians might be shocked to learn that when this bill passes, the high-speed rail line from Quebec City to Toronto will be automatically approved. They don't know where the rail line will be built, but it's already approved. If your home is in the way, they'll expropriate it. They just need to delete sections 8 through 12 of the Expropriation Act to get it done. In fact, they're so confident that in pre-approving the rail line without knowing the actual route, that the government is amending the Transportation Act to remove the ability of the government to amend the approval. I want to remind Canadians that half this bill is the government repealing decisions made by the Liberal government. Now they want to tie their hands to prevent any future government from correcting this mistake.
So it sounds to me like what the Liberal government wants to do is use the Green Slush Fund again, or whatever they've renamed it as, but they still have the bank that the infrastructure bank that's throwing money at all of these projects. So they can write checks to their friends and buy votes in Quebec City, while granting the individuals in Quebec City the right to try and expropriate land that is rightfully owned by individuals in Eastern Ontario. Some Ontario's good farmland is in Eastern Ontario. It seems that the Mark Carney government doesn't really care about any of that. They just want to be able to say to those people in Quebec, here, have my vote. I will do anything you ask me, including write you checks for the taxpayer.
Again, with this bill, the entire speed rail line is approved automatically and without an actual route. Then this bill states that the entire rail line is exempt from the dreaded unconstitutional Impact Assessment Act. However, each segment of the rail line is subject to the Impact Assessment Act. we can see where this is going because we've seen it all before. Once they determine the route, they will begin expropriating the land. Then they'll find a turtle or a frog on the land. The activists and proud socialists will demand the Liberals adjust the segment of the line. If it's a Liberal riding, the line will move. If it's a Conservative riding, they'll plow through.
You may be wondering what she meant. How could it be that the entire project doesn't have to meet the Impact Assessment Act, but the individual segments of the line do have to meet the Impact Assessment Act? Of course, that only revolves around the materials that are going into it. High-speed rail takes ridiculous amounts of cement. Now you want me to believe that they don't have to get approval for these, I don't know, it can only be called millions of tons of cement by the time you get from Quebec to Toronto. Again, all you have to do is look at Google, the TVR in France, and you'll see the line is just mile after mile after mile of concrete. So why they are exempt is because there's that much money in the design, in the implication, in the construction. There's all kinds of money to be pilfered from the Canadian taxpayer. They don't worry about that very much when it comes to these high-end individuals making real money for themselves so that they can buy a second car and have a place for their mistress to spend the weekend with and all the rest of that.
For a while now, I've wondered how this government was going to hit the ridiculous target of restoring 30% of Canada's developed lands to nature by 2030. One way would be to cut a straight line through the most developed and expensive lands in Canada, claiming it is for high-speed rail, then killing the entire project by blaming some turtles trying to win the Darwin Prize. This budget gives the unnamed rail corporation the power to issue stop work orders on any land it thinks it may need for the rail line. And once it puts your property on the maybe list, it'll have the first right of refusal for any sale. The rail corporation will have the right to issue stop work orders on any activity on your land, and the corporation will have the right to go onto your property at any time to ensure the work has stopped. In a normal expropriation, you receive a notice of intent. Then you have the option to object and a public hearing is held. Now you'll receive the notice and still be able to object, but there will be no hearing. And the final decision will be made by the minister behind closed doors.
I will admit that at time of recording, I don't know how much Brookfield stands to make off the train. I would have to go over and look at Moose's chart to see if it's on there, talk about who's in charge of it and how much money there's going to be made for Brookfield. But we know that Mark Carney's involved, and we know that the final decision will lie with the minister behind closed doors, meaning that Mark Carney or one of his cronies will have the right to decide whether or not you can appeal the decision. And I don't agree with that at all. The Mark Carney is not the end-all, be-all. This is not a dictatorship. And to rob a Canadian citizen of the right to go to court while you stand up in the House of Commons and laugh at the Conservatives because you want to all of a sudden give the right to decide to who can build a pipeline to the First Nations. I find it very, very contradictory that an individual in the First Nations on the outskirts of Canada can decide that a pipeline's not allowed to move, or an individual in Quebec can decide that a pipeline's not allowed to move. But a person who owns land in Canada can't decide that a train is not going to go on their property. I mean, does that sound like a two-tiered system to you? Because that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like Mark Carney's and his cronies get to decide who gets what and when and where, and the rest of us have no rights. The rest of us the Liberal government is trying to, with this budget, take away our right to complain, our right to say no, our right to keep you in court, our right to do what we like on our land that we pay for with our money and our hard work and our blood, sweat, and tears, as the expression goes. Why should Mark Carney, an economist, have the right to decide that? It's not like he's ever worked land. It's not like he's in the process of giving up one of his mansions to have the train built through it. It's not like he's in the process of saying, oh, I would rather use the high-speed rail than the high-speed jet that Canadians pay for. So how can these individuals be given the right to decide what's constitutional? They can write laws, I get it, but there's no way in the world they can say that they can enforce the law without involving a judge or a court of law. The system we live in is designed to be separated. The government's separated from the courts. We hear that all the time. You want to use the notwithstanding clause to force a person to sell you their territory or to tell them that you're not allowed to build a wind turbine? I mean, that would be really funny, wouldn't it? to watch the far left come along and say, no, you're not allowed to build that wind turbine on your property because we're building this hideous concrete massive thing through this area, and you're not, we're saying that we're going to build this concrete, so you're not allowed to put up the very green windmill. Now, I don't believe in windmills are utilized in the appropriate manner, but I do think it would be funny to watch the left chase its own tail over something like that. Despite all of the jokes that I may be implying, the idea that a person from a corporation, a person who trained himself in business or economics, can walk onto your territory, walk onto your land, decide whether or not you're allowed to build something, decide whether or not that building has to stop, no matter how many permits you have from whatever municipality you happen to be living in, and then just leave it there until they decide that they may or may not bring the train through. I mean, it's not like they have the right to stop that if you're right there. They're saying that they have the right to stop just in case, maybe what if. So now we're empowering people who are not even members of the court or the judicial arm of Canada to walk onto your territory, onto your land, onto your property. Now, can that same individual walk onto the First Nations bands and the territories, onto the reservations and say, no, we're going to put a pipeline through here. We're appropriating this land. Why would the individuals who are the First Nations be given special rules? Why would they be given special rights? I get that you don't want to go onto the reservation and tell them they're going to put the pipeline through. Okay, that's the situation that you want to participate in. That's your position. However, why would you then tell yourself that Canadians, individuals who are not of the First Nations, are somehow not privy to those kinds of social protections, those kinds of laws, those kinds of rights? Why all of a sudden, because Mark Carney and the Liberal government decides that they want to build this ugly train, this blight on the landscape, are you not permitted the same rights as an individual living on the coast of British Columbia who claims to be of the First Nations? I don't say to you that they have that the First Nations don't have a right to decide what goes on their lands. I'm saying that the individual in Eastern Ontario who's right now terrified that some individual from Mark Carney's cronies are going to come through and try to expropriate their land against their will, they also have the right to decide what goes on their land. Because that's the way it works. It's a one rule system, right? You always hear the Liberals talking about rule of law. Well, rule of law is applied equally, unless, of course, it's not rule of law and it's more communism or fascism, which apparently is the direction that the Liberal government seems to want to take this train, or at least some of the rules around building it. That's just my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.